What will happen to the Oakland Coliseum once the Athletics eventually depart? This is a question I find myself musing over quite a bit because, well, quite frankly, I love the Oakland Coliseum. We know baseball isn't long for the facility, which just may be the most iconic building in all of Oakland this side of the Tribune Tower. The Tribune Tower, though, that is an interesting place to start. The legendary building was damaged during the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake and sat empty for quite a few years afterwards. The newspaper moved out because of the damage and no one really knew what to do with it. The city of Oakland decided that, you know what, it was just going to demolish the entire thing. The city never got around to those plans. The Tribune Tower was purchased by a new owner who fixed it up. The paper moved in, the paper moved out, other tenants moved in. Eventually, it came into the hands of the most shady and incompetent owner this side of John Fisher. Seriously, Tom Henderson and John Fisher have to be friends, right? Anyway, I can't help but think about what a shame it would have been had the Tribune Tower actually been destroyed with some glass facade high-rise springing up in its place. The city of Oakland would be far worse for it. The Oakland Coliseum now finds itself in a similar state of flux to the Tribune Tower in the early 1990s. Namely, no one knows what anyone wants to do with it. A big reason for that is because John Fisher and the Oakland Athletics now own half of the Oakland Coliseum parcel that was sold to them by Alameda County because they wanted the team to stay. Utterly ridiculous there. The African American Sports and Entertainment Group have come out on several occasions saying they want to purchase the entire site. In fact, recently they went on to proclaim they were looking to buy out the A's from the Coliseum site. They've announced several different plans there. We've seen some rendering. Some have an arena on the Coliseum, some don't have it, but they seem committed to developing this into something. What exactly that something is remains unclear, and of course a lot of it also has to do with the fact they're still waiting to own everything. You can't build if you only own 50% of a land plot. The most likely outcome has always been that the Oakland Coliseum is demolished with a mixed-use development springing up in its place. Now, if that would include a sports stadium, has always been dependent upon should Oakland land another professional sports team. How realistic that is, look, I doubt the NFL is coming back to Oakland. More interestingly, though, was the fact that a few months back, the Oakland Roots and Soul Soccer Club unveiled plans to build a temporary stadium in one of the Oakland Coliseum's parking lots. That actually got me thinking about a potential solution that could be found some 600 plus miles to the north via, 80 to 505-25 in Portland, Oregon. Could Providence Park and Portland be a viable solution for the future of the Oakland Coliseum? Firstly, I'm not talking about the current incarnation of Providence Park, which has undergone some major investment, major renovations. What I'm referring to is sort of the early days of Jeld-Wen Field in 2010 and those first few seasons of the Portland Timbers. To me, that is where Oakland should look. I mean, what Providence Park has become today is pretty amazing. It's undoubtedly one of the best stadiums in the MLS, but I don't think Oakland is quite there yet with what the Coliseum could be. Jeld-Wen Field, though, that is very realistic. One thing we have seen with the old school multi-purpose stadiums is that while they're not perfect for soccer, they're just quirky enough to make it work. Providence Park wasn't necessarily the perfect venue, but it had enough positives and it lined up just close enough to what you would need for soccer to be a viable solution. As we've seen with San Jose Earthquakes games and some of those international friendlies held at the Oakland Coliseum, I think the same holds true for that facility. What we have never seen is the Coliseum as a soccer-focused venue. The games there have been one-offs, kickabouts, whatever you want to call them. They've always been a soccer game played in a football or a baseball stadium. That, though, is similar to the story on how what was then called PGE Park, way back in the early 2000s, became a soccer-first facility. The movement there began in 2003 when it hosted matches for the Women's World Cup. Everyone who went to games there, who watched it on television, they sort of saw that it wasn't the best soccer facility, but it was interesting. It had something there that could make soccer work. In Portland's quest to land an MLS team, all roads ended up leading back to PGE Park. They tried other sites, but none of them were quite as good as what was available there. They invested in making it a soccer first place. Now, of course, they did lose the Portland Beavers, their AAA team, in the process, but I think it's been a trade-off most in the city would make 10 days out of 10. Providence Park may not be perfect, but what it does have is history. It has soul, it has character, and those are incredibly important intangibles when it comes to a stadium, regardless of the sport. It's also kept alive a place in the city that has hosted everything from Civil War matchups between Oregon and Oregon State to Kurt Russell's foray in the minor league baseball. It is quintessentially Portland. In much the same way, the Oakland Coliseum is quintessentially Oakland, and in that regard, it should be retained as a usable facility in some way, shape, or form. Not a plaque, not a memorial home plate, but something usable, something that has function. At the end of the day, you can't replace World Series victories. You can't replace those great Raider teams. You can't replace Parliament Funkadelic concerts in Led Zeppelin. You can't even replace the location where Angels in the Outfield was filmed. Okay, so maybe that last one isn't going to be a huge draw for many people, but it was a thing that happened. As for the Coliseum site, I don't want to get lost specifically in the emotional pull to it. That's obviously an element there, but there's also a very practical reason, a pragmatic reason why something should be done with the Coliseum to keep it as a viable sporting complex. Namely, that being, it works. We've seen this work in the past. Now, there are a couple of ways you could go about converting the Coliseum into a soccer-focused stadium, and let's start with the most logical way to do so. That would be the setup where the field just runs along the third baseline, essentially from home plate or before home plate, all the way out to the outfield. Then you blow up Mount Davis, you put something modest along the other sideline to sort of give it an enclosed feel. Not too high though, we do not want to block that view of the Oakland Hills. But you get the idea here. What you would end up with is a facility that would look very similar to what Turner Field has become in Atlanta with Georgia State, although they use it for football, and this would be used for soccer. The second option, and one I'm sure people are going to tell me I'm stupid for even proposing, is to keep Mount Davis and have the soccer field run parallel to it. This is, by the way, is how the Oakland Raiders set up their field, is that, everything ran parallel to Mount Davis. From there, you keep the Coliseum areas behind the goals and then demolish the rest of the stadium while again putting up something modest along the other sideline. This would also give you more room to play around in the space between Oracle and the Coliseum, and would also provide views of the arena as well as the greater Bay Area. That being said, I'd be concerned about how the wind would play here, but I'm not a meteorologist, so I can't confirm or deny that this is an issue. In this potential setup, it would look almost similar to Manchester City's old home of Main Road, where you just had one huge mammoth stand and then everything else just looked kind of tiny around it. But honestly, I always thought that looked kind of cool, but it just may be me. The real benefit with this setup is you keep the newer part of the Coliseum, Mount Davis, as well as all of those totally unnecessary luxury suites and other areas that Al Davis had to have for the Raiders in Oakland. Look, again, like I said, I get why if anyone doesn't like this idea, but it's just something, it's a possibility, something to discuss. Now, no matter what plan you choose here, there are other areas that must be addressed, and there are other issues that simply weren't there when it came to Providence Park in Portland. The most pressing of these for the Coliseum is a scaling down of seats, and in particular the upper deck, which just doesn't need to be if you're creating a soccer-first stadium. We do know that it is possible to remove an upper deck. Arizona State did this with Sun Devil Stadium a few years back, where they just removed sections of their upper deck. And if you don't want to pursue that potential solution, then you could do something similar to what the Cleveland Guardians did with Progressive Field, where they just sort of revamped it into that weird bar area. I don't even know what the hell's going on up there, but you could turn it into some sort of monument to Oakland, where you just have, all of these banners or just things attributing to Oakland. Again, how this looks like, I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there as a potential solution if you don't want to level the upper decks. Additionally, all of those things that have been neglected by Alameda County and Oakland and the A's over the past decade, maybe even 20 or so years, need to be fixed. The plumbing, the locker rooms, the clubhouses, that all needs to be addressed. It needs to be revamped in a big way. The entire facility needs to be modernized. And of course, that process would be carried out in conjunction with the renovations and revamping of this into a soccer facility. Let's say you find out how much this all costs and that it could be potentially feasible to do as long as it makes sense financially. Does it make sense, I guess, is the question that you need to ask. Firstly, I don't want to have the MLS discussion today. Could Oakland pursue the MLS? Yeah, absolutely. But I don't think anyone quite knows what they're thinking about expansion. Are they going to do promotion and relegation? How that works? There are just so many unanswered questions on the MLS side that let's just not even get into that. Let's just focus on what we do know. And what we do know is that the Oakland Roots play in the USL. You also have Seoul Soccer Club, which is playing in the USL Women's League. Personally, I don't know a lot about it, but we know that they'll have games, they'll be playing games. Let's focus here on the Roots though. Since beginning play in 2019, their attendance has averaged anywhere between about 4,500 to 5,000 fans per game each season. Now, I know some of you out there will go, oh, that's not a lot, but they've also been playing in facilities that hold about 5,000. Most of their seasons were played at Laney College, a soccer stadium that holds 5,000 people. This season, their attendance did dip a little bit, but that's because they moved to Pioneer Stadium in Hayward. They also weren't all that good in 2023, which can explain the bit of a dip. But then again, it was just slightly under 4,000 people per game. Beyond that, let's take a look at the best USL attendance, and that resides just up the road in Sacramento with the Sac Republic, which is getting over 10,000 people a game. Also, getting more than 10,000 people a game is Louisville, and there are two sides that average above 9,500 folks per contest, those being teams in New Mexico and Indianapolis. Would the Oakland Roots be able to attract 10,000 plus people per game in a revamped Oakland Coliseum, regardless of what the capacity is? 15, 20, I don't know what that number ends up being, but could the Roots get 10K a game? Heck yeah, absolutely. And especially if there's no competition from the A's during the summer. Let's be real, the team was nearly selling out and selling out Laney College. The issue wasn't the fans, the issue was that they're playing in smaller venues because there aren't a lot of bigger venues around the East Bay. So ultimately, if you gave them a Coliseum, I think they get 10,000 a game easily. And maybe, again, I think they could probably do better. Like, a lot of folks are underestimating the support of the Oakland Roots and the Oakland Roots experience, which is one of the better sporting experiences I have witnessed firsthand. Now, I know from Sacramento, I should be a Sac Republic guy, but I think all of the Northern California USL teams are doing amazing things. Sac Republic, the Roots, Monterey Bay, like, I could make a case for any of these sides being in the MLS, but I won't here because that's not the point. What is the point is you've got a great, passionate fan base that will turn out, especially if the team is playing in a newly renovated Oakland Coliseum, which most Roots fans probably have fond memories of anyway, well, apart from the past few years. The downside here is that the Roots only play 17 or so home games a season, and even with maybe like a few friendlies, maybe they get an international opponent, whatever the case may be, you're looking at about 20 home dates a calendar year. Seoul Soccer Club will have its home dates as well, so maybe that's somewhere another 20 or so dates that they have. Maybe they have double headers with the Roots. I don't know how that plays out, but let's say you've got 40 dates confirmed for soccer. The big thing then becomes finding enough vents to keep the stadium busy and profitable throughout the year. There aren't many facilities of this size in Northern California. Really, everything is a super small 5,000, 6,000 seat stadium, or it jumps up to Levi Stadium or what the Coliseum is now. So there could be an interesting gap in the market a renovated Coliseum at 15, 20K does fill. To that, you're looking at all kinds of different events. You know, on the sporting front, soccer friendlies, high school football, monster jams, things like that. Things that don't need to play at Levi Stadium, but maybe want to have the ability to draw more fans than, say, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5,000 at Laney College. Then, of course, there's all the other stuff. You've got concerts, you've got other activities. There's always a need for a facility like this, a public gathering space. I'm sure there are other potential events and activities that the stadium could host that I am missing. And you know what? Here's the deal. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a financial expert. I don't know if the numbers work. I don't even know if the building works. There are reasons to at least think that a Providence Park style renovation for the Oakland Coliseum could be a viable solution to keep the Oakland Coliseum alive, even without an MLS team. I mean, if an MLS team does come, great, awesome, jackpot. But if not, so be it. You can still get by. More importantly, though, it keeps a significant building in Oakland alive, well, and in use. It gives future generations the chance to understand what came before them. Would Oakland have been better off demolishing the Tribune Tower in the mid-1990s? I don't think anyone says the answer to that question is yes, although it would have been the easier thing to do, and maybe it would have made a few people a quick buck. Similarly, the easy thing to do with the Oakland Coliseum is to demolish it, build over it, start over, and make a quick buck. But as we all know, sometimes the easiest thing to do is not necessarily the best thing to do. Think about all the communities in all of the cities across America who demolished their beloved stadiums and regret that decision to this day. It may not be feasible, maybe it's not worth pursuing, but it's at least worth kicking the tires on, keeping the Oakland Coliseum alive in some form. Thank you for watching this video. If you'd like to know a little bit more about why we don't appreciate old stadiums like the Oakland Coliseum and why I just can't get enough of them, well, check out the video in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. Until next time, I am Cheyenne Hollis. This is the Touchback. Hashtag sell the team. Hashtag take it out to the 25.